Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Mindsets podcast. Today, we're actually online, which is the first time we've done this, but there's a very, very good reason why we are doing this. So I'm going to hand over straight away to today's guest, Juurian. And do you want to just give us a bit of an introduction as to why we might be doing this online and who you are?
Yeah, of course. So my name is Juurian, and right now I'm in a town which I believe is called Sakarya. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. I'm not even sure, which is somewhere in the middle of Turkey. And the reason I'm here is because I cycled all the way here. So I started back home in Rotterdam, in the Netherlands. That's where I'm from. And I've been on the road for, I think, 55 days now to get here. And I just got started because my plan is to cycle all the way around the world. So I have quite a bit to go still.
Well, I mean, it's incredible to first of all have the goal of cycling around the world, and we're definitely going to dive into how and why you're doing that. But the first thing that we do on the podcast is we like to do show and tell. And despite the fact that you are living out of a bag at the moment, you still have something to show and tell. So do you want to sort of let us know what that is?
Yeah, of course. I brought this over here. I hope you can see it on the camera. It's a necklace, and I believe, if I'm right, this stone is called blue fluorite, and it's something a girl I dated once gave me, which was 12 years ago by now, and I haven't really been able to leave it behind. She gave it to me in a time where I wasn't doing too well. I developed tinnitus, I don't know how it's pronounced in English.
Tinnitus, yeah.
Tinnitus, like ringing in the ears, which had a very, very severe impact on my life. And she gave me this stone because, according to her, it would cure my tinnitus. Obviously, it didn't. You know, it's it's a stone. It doesn't do anything. But I don't know. It was just the kindest gesture. I don't know. It touched me, and I've been carrying it ever since. So for I think 12 years now, I've been carrying it around my neck. And I'm bringing it all the way around the world.
Have you found that while it might not have helped with the tinnitus, it's brought you other sort of luck or fortune along the way?
Yeah, I feel like it's kind of a lucky charm. I mean, I carry it all the time. So every time something nice happens, it's on me anyways. So that might be a bit of cheating, but I like to feel it's because of this lucky charm. Yeah.
Amazing. Okay, that's a really nice one. It's nice to see that there's something that's going to go with you the entire travels, and clearly you hold dear. And we're going to get into the tinnitus thing as well, I'm sure, along this story. But one thing that's particularly interesting is cycling isn't something that you've been doing. You're not a former Tour de France racer, as far as I'm aware, but you have a bit of a background in general sports. So bouldering, you have done a bit of cycling, but also some running. What's your kind of interest in those different sports?
That's an interesting one. I guess in general, I just like being physically active. I used to do a couple of team sports long ago, like basketball and whatever. Turn out I'm not too much into those. I'm more into things where, you're alone, I guess. You're not dependent on other people. So I picked up running. I really hate running, to be honest. I don't enjoy it at all. But afterwards, it's kind of nice, you know, after you finish a run, then I feel good. And there's just something in me that makes me set all these ridiculous physical goals, like these sort of heavy physical challenges. And I decided I'd run a marathon. So I did. But because I hated running, I didn't want to properly prepare. So I just went for a couple of runs. I did like a 15K, a 20K once. And then I thought, that's fine. I'll just do it.
Wow. Okay.
I did it, but it was terrible. I couldn't walk for like a week.
I can imagine that's a lot of sudden load to put on your body. I definitely wouldn't recommend doing that. But to be fair, I think the hardest part of doing a marathon probably is the training, because the marathon itself is 42 kilometers, but then the amount of kilometers you have to run in training, I mean, typically someone's probably run in excess of 500 kilometers.
Yeah. So my thought process was more like, okay, I can do all these 500 kilometers and then have an easy marathon. And I can also do it the other way around. I can not do the 500 kilometers and then I'll have a terrible marathon, but it's only going to be like 4 hours, like
This is true. This is
4
true.
hours. Yeah.
Amazing. So where did your interest in bouldering come from? As far as I'm aware, there's not many mountains in Rotterdam.
No, there's 0 mountains in all of the Netherlands. There's 0 places where you can go bouldering outside. But we have the indoor halls, of course. And it's something I picked up during the COVID pandemic. I don't really know why. A friend took me bouldering and I was really into it. I like how it's sort of a combination between being very physical, but also sort of analytical. You kind of have to make a plan how to do a route. You have to think about the moves, and it's not always straightforward. So it's a nice mix of thinking and moving, I guess. And that's what I like about it. So it's actually one of the few things I feel were a bit hard to leave behind when I went on this trip, knowing I wouldn't be bouldering for a year or 2.
I'm sure you'll find somewhere along the way that has some good bouldering spots. If you make it to the UK, I'm sure we can set some sort of bouldering stuff up for you, no worries. One of the things that I also find quite interesting about your background is that you did engineering. So for people that are listening to this that don't know, I also studied engineering when I was at university. And I've pretty much, I basically have somewhat turned my back on it. I'm still a bit of a nerd here and there. But what was your reason for getting into engineering when you were younger?
Yeah. That's a very simple one. Also a very bad one, by the way. The only reason why I got into engineering was because I was good at math. I just like math. I didn't know what to do. I turned 18. I had to study, and I don't know. I was maybe not developed enough to make a good decision, and my mind didn't really stretch further than I like math.
I think, honestly, yeah, I don't think I'm far different from that at all. It was one of those where it's like, I'm supposed to carry on with education. This is something I've been okay at so far. So I guess I'll carry on. But through studying maths, you've actually gone on and you became a teacher.
Yeah, that's true. So during my studies, I picked up a job on the side teaching high school kids, teaching math. And turned out I really enjoyed that. It turned out I was kind of good at it. I just really enjoyed helping people, teaching people something. So eventually I finished my studies and I didn't really get into actual engineering. I didn't pick up an engineering job, but I started teaching math to engineering students. So now I teach for mechanical engineering.
Oh, very nice. Are you still able to do that while you're on the road, or have you left that behind as well?
No, actually, I'm still doing it on the road. So that's a bit of an interesting one. But I brought my laptop and now I work 1 day a week. And I don't actually teach classes, but I record videos in which I just explain topics about physics, math, and...
Amazing. So if any of those students are watching this, they probably feel like they're back in class.
Pretty much, yeah.
Amazing. So one of the things that I will say is, for anyone listening, it might seem that we're going through Juurian's story a million miles an hour, but we obviously want to get to the kind of thing that's going on at the moment. One thing that we haven't touched on, though, is, and I guess we've kind of pointed at it with the tinnitus a little bit, but you have a deep interest in music, and I believe you used to play quite a bit of music.
Yeah, that's true. Music in general is a bit of a complicated topic for me. It's something I care about a lot. And the way that came to be is back when I was younger, I did not have such a great time. I actually didn't learn that until very recently. I have been dealing with a lot of repressed memories, but I didn't have such a great time. And somehow I picked up music. So I started playing drums. I don't really remember exactly when, but I think I might have been 13, maybe 14 at the time. And I joined a band. We played metal. It was terrible. We were horrible, but we had a lot of fun. And it was, I don't know, I found all kinds of social circles around music. I started going to venues, to gigs, to festivals. And I really, in some way, built my life around music. So listening to it, playing, and visiting concerts and whatever. And then I developed the tinnitus, and it really swept me off my feet. I had a very hard time dealing with it, and it got to a point where I felt I had to quit music, because if I would continue, I thought I would make it worse. And I couldn't make it worse. It was already at a stage where I could barely deal with it. So I dropped music, and subsequently I also dropped all the social circles around music, the ones I developed. And it just became a very touchy topic. And that actually continued later in life, because I did manage to pick it up again. I dealt with the tinnitus. It took me out for like 3 or 4 years. I didn't do anything but just cry and sit and stare. I stopped studying. I stopped sports. I stopped seeing friends. I stopped playing music. And then eventually I managed to pick it up again. And there's a whole new chapter of the story. The short version is I met a girl. We fell in love. I played in her band, which was actually very successful. And it was just a dream come true, like I was playing music together with my girlfriend. And it was the best thing I could wish for. And then, of course, eventually we broke up, and she was singing in the band. She's like the face of the band, so she's irreplaceable, which kind of meant I had to leave the band. And it kind of felt like the tinnitus thing all over again. Like, I saw it all just crumble down again. And now I'm at a point where it's just very complicated. I still very much enjoy music, but it's just a complicated topic.
Yeah, I can feel with music, obviously each song is effectively telling a story, but then a bit like when it comes to training, and we said about the marathons, it's the hours that you put in behind the actual day. So a song doesn't just fall out. And sometimes I'm aware that some of the best musicians can have a jam and they can kind of put something together on the spot. But if you're actually going to be playing set songs, there's a lot of practice that's involved with that. There's a lot of studying different types of music to put that together. So especially when you were younger and you developed tinnitus, just actually as a bit of a description for people that maybe not so aware, what was your experience of tinnitus? Because I'm aware is it like a ringing in your ears permanently?
Yeah. So for me, it's a very high-pitched tone, which I hear permanently. When I just developed it, I couldn't really tell if I was hearing it on my right ear or my left ear, or sort of like in the middle. It's very hard to describe, but you can't really point at a source, but it was just there. Then it changed a little bit over time, so it became a bit higher pitched, lower pitched, and it would go like kind of up and down. And I think that took maybe a year before it sort of settled into this very stable, exactly the same sound always. And that's been about 10 or 11 years now, 11 years by now. And I still hear the same sound 24/7 right now.
Is it something that you are able to sometimes block out, or are you constantly aware of it?
Yeah, I wouldn't say block out, because I do always hear it. But eventually, as the years pass, you just learn to not care about it. So I still hear it. I'm not blocking it out. I just don't feel stressed anymore when I hear it. It's just, normal. Kind of like, I don't know, when you hear the air conditioning in your room or whatever, you hear it, but it doesn't really bother you.
True. For one, I wish the UK had air conditioning, because it's been horrible. It's been horrible in summer so far. I mean, we haven't really had a summer, but when it has been hot, it's been disgusting. But no, I completely get what you mean, kind of having that almost like white noise in the background constantly. But interestingly, with that, obviously that took you away from effectively what your passion was, I suppose, at the time. And so it would be incredibly difficult to kind of keep going and living a normal life when the main thing that you're enjoying, especially when it brings you social impact and everything like that, is taken away. One thing that I think is really nice is obviously that you did discover it. Again, you rediscovered it. And while it was a part of this really nice love story that you had, as it came to an end the second time, did you feel somewhat Did you feel exactly the same as you did before, or did you feel somewhat more prepared because you'd kind of gone through it before and you still managed to keep some of those other elements in your life that you'd got back going as well?
Yeah, that's a hard question. I guess in a way I did feel more prepared. I felt like, hey, I've been through this before. This feels familiar. Um, but I have to say it didn't really make it much easier. It's something I still struggle with very much every day. Also because it's a bit more recent than the tinnitus thing. The tinnitus I've had for 11 years now. And this breakup and leaving the band and whatever, that was about 2.5, 3 years ago, which is a long time still. But yeah, I'll be honest, it's something I still very much struggle with on a daily basis. And it's honestly also been one of the reasons why I'm doing this trip, why I'm cycling right now. So yeah, I did feel a little bit more prepared, but
It's still not easy.
no.
Okay, so one of the things that you kindly sent me on a voice note beforehand, which I'd love to talk about at this point, is you do actually seem to be pretty in tune with the fact that your mental health hasn't been great, and not ignoring it is actually a really good thing. But you actually went through some different processes to try and help your mental health, and I think there's some really interesting techniques here. So yeah, would you mind giving us a bit of an explanation about the different things you've tried?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I've tried a couple of things. I spend a lot of time with psychologists, talking to psychologists. And for me, that's been a little bit hit or miss, I guess. So a couple of times that really did help me. A couple of times I just didn't maybe have the right click with the person. And yeah, I wasn't too thrilled about it. So I think that's something important to mention. I think psychologists can do a lot of good, but it's maybe not always very easy to find the right psychologist for you. So yeah, I would like to give away as a message to people, if you're struggling and you do see a psychologist and the first time you don't feel it's helping, try not to give up on it right away. Maybe see another psychologist, the third one or fourth one, I don't know. It's important you have this click. So anyways, that's something I tried. I tried medication, like, what are they called in English? Antidepressants, I guess.
Yeah.
That's something I've tried for a while. I did EMDR, which is very strange, to be honest, but effective.
What is EMDR?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what the acronym stands for, to be honest, but EMDR is a technique where you try and sort of reset the way you feel about traumatic memories or events in the past. And the way it works is you just sit and your therapist will ask you questions about these traumatic memories or events and try to get you to recall them. And while you're doing that, you have to do all these kinds of crazy assignments. So he will be holding a pen in front of your face, going back and forth, and you have to follow it with your eyes. And at the same time, you have to sort of like tap rhythms on your legs, or count down from 100 to 0 in steps of 7 or whatever. Like all these weird ass assignments you have to do while you recall these memories. And it sounds crazy. And the first time you do it, I don't know. I had a very hard time taking it serious. It just felt ridiculous. But I will admit it did do quite a lot for me. And I've spoken to a lot of people that have done the same thing, EMDR, and it proves to be crazy effective for some people. It's just a way to make your brain sort of reset the feelings you attach to these traumatic events. So yeah, that's one I've done. And there's another one I've done, which is, I guess, kind of crazy to a lot of people. So I took mushrooms, like psychedelic mushrooms, in a medical setting, together with a shaman, that's called, I guess, in English.
I honestly, I don't know.
And that was pretty wild as well. So yeah, you basically visit someone, you have a couple of conversations just as you would with a psychologist, and then eventually you make an appointment to actually take the mushrooms. And yeah, you take them, you lie down, and you have the wildest, craziest experience. For me, it was the first time doing psychedelics. I had no idea what to expect. I mean, people told me about it, but honestly, after doing it, you cannot explain psychedelics in words. Like it's gonna be very different from any expectation you have. For me, it was a very, very, very intense, beautiful and heartbreaking experience, and yeah, that really stuck with me. Felt very good afterwards. For maybe a week, I was just ecstatic, feeling great and very relieved. That effect wore down a little bit over the days afterwards. I'm still very happy I did it. It gave me quite some insights about the past. I think that's maybe the most important thing to say about it. It gives you this sort of superhuman power where you can kind of step out of your body and look at yourself from a distance and kind of be another person giving advice to yourself. I actually compare to, we all have had these friends that are like in a relationship crisis. And you're on the side and you see from the outside, it's just messed up and it's very clear what needs to happen. You need to take a break, you need to break up or whatever. But for the person in the relationship, it's very hard to see. And it's very hard to actually take that advice. And then when I did psychedelics, I kind of felt like I could be that person to myself. I could look at myself, give myself that advice, and then actually listen to it. And yeah, it was a crazy experience.
Is that something that you then, as a result of doing it when you were on psychedelics, is that something you've had any better ability of doing now, giving yourself advice?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. I'm not going to say it's this magical, drug that you take once and then it's fixed.
Everything is fixed, yeah.
But I will say it has given me a better understanding of how I deal with trauma or, my emotions. And it's given me a bit more of a handle on it, a proper way to handle it, yeah.
One question that I've got. So first of all, I want people to remember that Juurian has done this in a controlled environment. He didn't just go round to the person on the corner of the street and grab the psychedelics and go to a park. One thing that I do want to know, though, is specifically in English, obviously mushrooms get tied quite heavily to hippies, and what we have a term for is tree huggers, because I think when people are on psychedelics, they like being in nature, that kind of thing. When they gave you these psychedelics, did they just put you in a room, or did they put you in a nice nature environment? Were you quite free to do what you wanted?
No, it was in a room, kind of a nature-ish room, I will admit. There was a lot of wood, a lot of pillows, candles, nice scents, and so I guess the room looked slightly hippie-ish, but still it was a very, safe and in a way a medical environment. There was someone supervising me all of the time, so it felt very safe.
That's got to be a very interesting job, whoever's got that.
I thought exactly the same. After I did it, I was like, oh my god, I want this to be my job. This is what I want to do.
Well, instead of doing that, what you ended up doing was you've done some other cycles. So this isn't actually the first long cycle you've done, as you let me know. So am I right in thinking you had been to, was it Athens and Copenhagen? You did cycles to there first?
Yeah.
How did they start?
Yeah. So the first one was 2 years ago during summer. Because I teach, I have a long summer break, 5 weeks. And I didn't really have anything planned. And I was just thinking, what am I going to do? I was going through a tough time. This was very shortly after that breakup I mentioned. And I just really felt I wanted to do something I had never done before, just to experience something new. I thought maybe it's gonna suck, maybe I won't like it. Who cares? At least I tried. There's nothing to lose. And then I decided, okay, I'll just grab a bike and I'll cycle somewhere far. And I decided on Copenhagen for some reason. So did it. Thought it would be hard. I was like, oh my God, that's 1,000 kilometers. Then I did it. I reached it and I was like, wow, that was super easy.
How long did that take you?
Yeah, pretty long. Maybe that's why I felt like it was easy.
I see.
Pretty easy. I think it took me like 18 days or something, 19 days. Okay. And it's 1,000 kilometers. So I was doing less than 100 kilometers a day on a very light bike. I didn't bring a tent or whatever. I was just sleeping in Airbnbs. So it was an expensive way of traveling and a very easy way, but very enjoyable. And I had a ton of cool experiences. I met super cool people and I enjoyed it. And then a year later, I thought, okay, that was fun. I can do the same, but I'll try to go a bit further. So I decided on Athens, which is about 3.5 times as far, 4 times as far. And that took me 7 weeks. And that one was really wild. I had a ton of crazy stuff happening. And that one is what really got me into it. I finished it. I went home and I thought I have to do this again and I have to go even further. And I want more of these crazy experiences. And that's how I ended up here in Sakarya or wherever I am right now.
So what were some of these crazy experiences? Because you've hinted at them, and you don't have to tell me all of them, but if there's any that jump out, I'd love to know.
Yeah, wow, there's a ton, but let me think. There was this one. This wasn't a good experience, but it was an interesting one. I set up my tent somewhere. I was wild camping because there was only one legal camping place and they were charging 50 euros for just like a few meters of grass. And I thought, I'm not going to do that. So I set up my tent somewhere in like a forest. And then when I went to bed, I had this tarantula kind of spider. I looked it up later. It's called a wolf spider, apparently. And it was in my tent, but I didn't notice until I actually got in. And I had this coffin style tent, the ones you can actually only lay down in. So
very small, yeah.
Yeah, I undressed outside because there's no space to do it inside. So I got down to my underwear, I crawl in, and I have this headlamp on my head. So I close the zipper, I turn around, and like 5 centimeters from my face, there's this big-ass tarantula just on the inside of my tent. And I completely lost it, man. I hate spiders. I cannot deal with spiders.
I'm not surprised, especially before an event like that, maybe fair enough anyway, but then after something like that. So what did you do?
Well, I just kind of froze. Then I rolled over, unzipped, got out of the tent, and I did this sort of dance because I thought it would be on my back or my chest or whatever. So I just jumped around for 3 minutes. Then I gathered the balls to actually look inside my tent. It was still in exactly the same place. It hadn't moved. And then I was dumb enough to pick up a stick and kind of poke it because I needed it to move. And it actually fell down into my sleeping bag. And then it just sort of crawled in and it just went from worse to even worse. So in the end, I took out my sleeping bag. I sort of like shaked it and it fell out. And I killed it with a shoe, which was honestly disgusting. And I felt a little bit bad about it. But I sort of smacked it with a shoe. And it just got back up again. It continued walking. And it was just disgusting, man.
I think most people would have just burnt the tent down at that point. Just, that's it. Amazing. So you decided after that experience that was something you wanted more of as you travel around the world. So I think one of the things that we've alluded to a bit, but I've also seen on some of your social media, especially on some of the stories with your Instagram page, which, by the way, everyone, if you're interested to go and follow Juurian's journey, it will be tagged and collaborated with for the social media, that sort of thing. So go and have a look. But you do seem to run into lots of amazing people, and it's one of the things I've been fortunate enough to experience myself last year. Is I did a bit of traveling in Asia, not the classic I'm a gap year person, but it kind of was that. I did the same route as everyone that does that, and it was amazing just to meet people, and all these people with different culture backgrounds and different values are generally so kind, and I feel it's because they don't have the stress of the corporate world and that sort of thing behind them. But that must be something that you're definitely enjoying at the moment. And I want to know, in your lead up to what you're doing now, was there much planning route wise and kind of cultures that you wanted to experience along the way?
Yeah. No, not really, honestly. My plan was I want to cycle around the world, as in an actual lap around the world. And there's not so many ways to do that. If you start in the Netherlands, you can either decide to go west or east. Well, I decided to go east. With all the stuff going on in the world right now, there's a lot of territories that are kind of like off limits. So I ended up quite quickly with a route in mind. And I didn't think too much about the cultures I want to visit or places I want to see, because honestly, like, all the places you're going to see and all the cultures you're going to see, they are different from yours, and they're going to be interesting. And I don't know, I thought I'll just see whatever I run into along the way. And so far that's been really amazing. I didn't even get that far from home. I'm in Turkey right now. I started in the Netherlands, so I've only crossed Europe. But still, I mean,
that's quite far still.
I guess. But even in this piece in Europe, you run into, just places that are very different from home. And the people are very different, super kind, super helpful. It's really cool.
One thing that I think is going to be quite an interesting question is, you are cycling around the world right now. There must have been a lot of build up in sort of emotion to doing that and starting that off. How does it feel now that you are actually doing it? You're in the process of it.
Yeah, wow. Well, that's a tough question. Because yes, there was a lot of build up in emotion. It was very hard. The months preceding my departure were very tough. It's just a lot of things to take care of. Emotionally, it's very hard because you're leaving so many things behind. Your friends, your family, your stuff, your house, and almost all of my job. So that was very stressful, very emotional. Now I've been cycling for about 8 weeks. And I will say the first 4 weeks were very easy. I was very excited, and, show is finally on the road, and I was just excited, and the weather was great. And then the past 4 weeks have been different. I guess I'm still feeling good. I'm still feeling motivated, but I'm also realizing more and more every day that this is going to be very, very, very tough to finish. And I'm not talking about physically, like the cycling. Yes, of course it's tough, but mentally it's just very tough. And there's a lot of factors which I maybe have not given enough thought to. For example, the weather. Before I left, I thought, okay, like it might get hot, it might rain. I'll deal with it. But it's really been brutal. Like these last 4 weeks, I have not had a single day where the temperature dropped below 35 degrees, which is very hot, but it's way hotter when you're outside every day, all day on a bike. And you even sleep outside in a tent. Like in the middle of the night, you're just laying there, butt naked, sort of cooking, dripping in sweat. And that really wears you down after 4 weeks.
It's something I don't know if you watched this. Obviously, last year in the UK, the hardest geezer, or Russ Cook, became quite famous for running through Africa. And I was following that through YouTube, and I started watching it actually as he was towards the back end, sort of I feel like it was the last 3 months or so. But I went back and watched some of his first ones, and the first one's a bit like you said there. He's extremely excited. He's happy to get the miles in. Body feels fine. And then he starts to hit this point where he's like, God, it's just hot here all the time. There's sand everywhere. It's getting in my eyes, all of this. And it starts to become this almost daunting aspect. But again, just keeping plugging away. But definitely I can imagine that the struggle to get proper rest. And obviously, if you're sweating that much, you need to fuel that sweat. So that's a lot of liquid, a lot of salt that you need to be getting in. It's quite a lot to handle, even though it seems like a simple thing to just hop on the bike and cycle for the day.
Exactly, yeah. So logistically, it's crazy tough. It's a little bit easier now because I brought a tent and I can basically sleep everywhere I want. You can just set up your tent anywhere. But there is a lot of stuff to think about. Having water whenever you need it, it's not so easy in a lot of places. Sometimes you have a stretch of like 80 kilometers where you can't get water anywhere. And it just takes a toll on your body. And right now I'm carrying like this whole sort of, it's just a giant bag full of medicine, like creams, tablets, pills, powders, all kinds of stuff just to keep my body in working condition. It's just really a lot to think about. It's not as easy as getting on a bicycle and going this direction.
Yeah, and there's a lot of logistics, and again, and I'm not saying it's at all on the same level, but even last year when I went to Asia, one of the things that I had to consider was I want to take the medicine that I recognize, because if I'm in a country and I don't speak the language and I don't actually know what I need, it's very difficult for me to rely on what I'm going to buy over the counter. But then even on the logistics side of getting into that country, I'm sure there's some places that you're going to have to sort out, maybe visa situations, maybe even getting in touch with those embassies. Is that something that you've thought of far in advance for a few of those countries?
It's something I've thought of, but not done yet, because I also don't know when I will be arriving in those countries. So I can't apply for a visa yet because you need to give them a date, and anything can happen on the bike. If I'm still 3,000 kilometers away, there's a very high chance I'll get sick somewhere. I'll have mechanical problems. Some border is going to be closed or whatever. So I need to do those things at the right time. I kind of need to figure out, if I apply for the visa, how many days will it take till I get it? And then I sort of try and time it at the right moment. So I think this is going to be quite the challenge for the next few months. Up to now, I've been lucky. So I haven't been in any country yet where I need to apply for a visa. Next country is Georgia. And then after that, it's going to get tricky. So Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, and all the countries after that, I will need a visa.
Well, hopefully if anyone listening to this is able to help out in any way, they'll obviously reach out to Juurian. I think that's something as well. Russ had an entire team helping him along the whole way. So he wasn't having to do it. He just could, sometimes he could just clock the miles and crack on. One of the things that you mentioned when you were younger doing sport was that you prefer doing solo sport. Now you're obviously on a bike, you're by yourself. Does it almost feel a bit like therapy? You've dropped everything to travel the world. It reminds me of the film Walter Mitty, where he leaves his office job because he needs to go and find this photographer. He travels the world doing so and kind of discovers himself. Not saying that you're discovering yourself, but is it kind of therapeutic to kind of be free of everything?
So I haven't seen the movie, but it is a form of therapy, absolutely. I find it hard to put into words, but I feel for me, just being physical, just moving a lot, it really helps my mental health. It makes me feel a lot better. I get restless if I don't do it. And I just go in circles in my head if I sit still. And I guess in a way, this is, I'm not going to say a way to escape it, but it's a way to do something I will really enjoy. I will get to see all these beautiful places, beautiful people, do a lot of cool stuff. And at the same time, just have a sort of, maybe a sort of break for myself. I will just have a long period where I know I will feel good mentally, just make some space in my head to process a couple of things. And it's a form of self-care. I think.
I like it. It's a very dramatic one, but I think it's a very commendable one as well, because like we've said, it's not going to be easy, but there'll definitely be quite a few enjoyable moments in there. I wanted to actually jump to some of the listener questions. So For people that might be new to the podcast or don't know, there's listener questions. So before I record with any guest, I like to put up something on the story and gives an opportunity for you guys to actually ask questions that you'd be interested in related to each guest. So I have 3 questions here today. The first question is from Harry, and Harry asks, and I don't think it's specific to this trip so far, but what's your favorite country in the world?
My favorite country in the world? Wow. I think so far it must be Greece. Maybe I'll have another one once I finish this trip. But Greece, I've been really, really, really enjoying. It's just a beautiful place. People are super cool. They have amazing food, which was actually a surprise to me because we have a lot of Greek restaurants in the Netherlands. They are all terrible. It's gross. And then you get to Greece and everything is just so good. And I don't know, I just really like the vibe. They have all these stray dogs and stray cats everywhere, but they're nice stray dogs and cats. So people feed them, people take care of them, and they just come and hang out. And yeah, I don't know.
I've got to say, what you were saying about the Greek food, I think if I could live off pita bread, tzatziki, and probably gyros and maybe some baklava as well, I'd be a happy man for the rest of my life. So I completely get you on that one. Okay, so the second question I've got is from Millie, and she wants to ask you about the equipment that you've taken with you. So what is one piece of equipment you wish you'd left behind, and what's become your most favored piece of equipment? It might not be something that you thought would be that useful before you left, but yeah, what's the thing that you'd leave behind, and what's something that you're very glad you brought with you?
Yeah, that's a very good question, actually, because that's something that's constantly on your mind. You're on the bike and you have very limited space. You don't want to bring too much weight. So it's something I think about every day. And my answer would be the thing I'm very happy I brought is a pillow. It's sort of like a half inflatable, half normal pillow by Nemo. And it's really, really, really good because sleep is just so important for me on this trip. And I think it really, really improves my sleep quality. So that's the thing I'm happy I brought. And the thing I regret bringing is just too much clothing. So a couple of weeks ago, I sent back a package to the Netherlands with just a bunch of clothing. And it might sound crazy, but I actually sent back both of my cycling shorts, like padded cycling shorts. I just don't use them. I don't really know why, but you sweat.
That means that saddle must have got either remarkably comfortable or your behind has got extremely resilient.
I think it's the latter one.
Understandable. And the last question is from Ben. So this is another question which I quite liked. But when you're on the bike, what is your favorite snack?
My favorite snack? That's a good one. I've been eating a lot of bananas.
Is that to stop the cramp?
Yeah, I think it helps. I've been enjoying the taste. Like they taste a little bit different in every country, but so far they have all been good. Greek bananas, Turkish bananas. So yeah, I think it will be bananas.
Very solid and a very healthy choice. Very healthy choice. Great. So the next part of the podcast is where we do the 3 pieces of advice. So when we do this, what I like to say is remove me from the conversation now. And if you could look back to a younger version of yourself, it could be 3 versions of yourself. What 3 quick pieces of advice would you give to that person?
Okay. That's a tricky one, but I think the first one, the biggest one would be I would like to tell myself to stop avoiding diving into trauma. I knew something was wrong and I just kind of neglected it for a long time, hoping it will go away or, just, I don't know, dissolve into thin air. Well, surprise, surprise, it didn't. And I think that would really have changed my life if I were able to just face it at an earlier age. My life would look very different. So I think that's number one. Number two is, maybe going... How do I say this? Let me think for 1 second. I think number two would be choosing to do the stuff you really like instead of stuff you just end up doing. So I'm talking mostly about my studies right now. I don't regret studying mechanical engineering, but pretty early on I could tell, like, okay, I'm not as much into this as the other students, and I was actually interested in medicine. And then I didn't do it, and I still kind of regret it to this day. So that would be number two. And number three would be that if you really, really, really care about something, be it a job or some sort of passion, music, a sport or whatever, you should just really, really stick with it and make it happen, and just arrange your life in a way that there is space to do it and that you can grow in it, and not neglect it. I feel that's something I've been doing. Like, I have or had this huge passion, and I kind of let it go to waste because I was too busy with all kinds of random stuff.
I think that's all very solid advice and all very relatable as well. I think everyone, especially with that last one, can turn around and say that sometimes we prioritize the wrong things, and it becomes clear further down the line, which is the sad thing, because hindsight is clear. Hindsight's 20/20 vision. So yeah, I think they're really good pieces of advice. So thank you very much for those. The last question comes from the previous guest. So in the last episode, I had Johnny on, who is a triathlete. At the time of us recording, that episode's not actually out yet. So you're going to be the only person that knows what question he asked. But he wanted to ask you, what's one decision that you have made that's changed your life the most? And why do you think that decision's changed your life the most?
And does he mean that in changing my life in a good way or in a bad way?
Not necessarily. So when he was talking about it, he said that obviously every day we make so many decisions, and we might think that they're small decisions, and then sometimes in life there are some bigger decisions to make, but he can look back on his career as a triathlete and there's a pivotal point where he remembers one decision that has changed his life. And in his case, it wasn't necessarily the best. It wasn't necessarily the worst, but yeah, it's kind of open to you to decide what that most pivotal moment was.
Okay. Well, this might not be the most fun answer, but I guess it's the most honest one. And it relates to the advice I was just giving myself. For me, it's been the decision to consciously not get into treatment for my therapy. So my girlfriend at the time kind of handed it to me on a silver plate. She would say, I think you're dealing with these issues. You should look into it. And I just threw it in the trash. I was like, no, that's not what's going on. That's not true. I don't have to deal with it. And I didn't. And that has had a lot of impact. I didn't do it. I lost a relationship. I lost music. I lost my band. And it just really messed me up. And I think that's the single decision that led to me cycling around the planet right now. If I would have done it differently, I would not be talking to you right now.
I think for now, I think for now it seems like it's not necessarily a positive thing, but I'm a big believer in, and I can't remember, I really should know this as a podcaster. I should know who came up with this sort of story or mantra, I guess, but there's a story where it's about the term maybe. And I don't know if you know it, but there's a farmer who has a son who's working the land, and the country that they're in goes to war. And when they go to war, they decide they're going to recruit all of these young men. And so they come to the farm. The son has actually hurt himself. And they say, oh, it's terrible that your son's hurt himself. And the farmer says, oh, maybe. And then they come to recruit for the army, and they can't take his son because his son's injured. And they say, oh, it's fantastic, your son doesn't have to go to war because he's injured. And he's like, maybe. And it's this continuation of keeping that step back of, it may not be good now, but it may be good in future. And when it's good, it may not be bad now, but it may be bad in future. So keeping that level playing field. And I think while on the short term in your journey, it may seem like it's not the positive thing, I think what you're doing now, you never know where that's going to take you. I mean, again, not saying that this is even in your goals, but if you look at when Russ started running across Africa, not many people knew about it. And now he's come back and everyone knows who he is in the UK. And I think the impact that you can have doing the journey that you're embarking on now, and the people you're going to meet and make friends across the world for life, which is incredible. But also, I think one of the most incredible things, and something I want to ask you about, is you're doing this as a charity fundraiser as well. So you're working with Movember. Do you want to tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah. We talked earlier about this being a form of therapy for myself. Obviously, I'm working on my mental health, and I care a lot about that. It's been a big topic in my life, and doing this trip, I just realized it would be a waste not to help other people along the way. You know, I have big plans, and I thought it would be kind of beautiful to use those plans to also raise money for other people. So I help myself doing this trip, but I also help all these other guys that struggle with their mental health. And that's why I got in touch with Movember. And I just recently started the fundraiser, and it's been going pretty well so far. On the first day, I raised about 5,000 euros, which might not sound like a lot, but to me it is a lot. It's a crazy idea that people would donate 5,000 euros just because I'm cycling. So it's been really touching for me. And I hope that grows into a lot more than 5,000.
Fantastic. Well, I tremendously hope the same. And I think 5,000 is incredible, but obviously we'll share the link here. So if anyone listening to this also wants to go and donate, anything will help. And I think even if you think of it as a monetary value, then yes, that's obviously very helpful. But again, for Juurian there, seeing 5,000 being raised is a massive push, and will help him through some of those tougher days, especially those sweaty nights. So I'll make sure that that's down in the description and shared on the social media. Now, before we round off, I obviously need to ask for your question for the next guest. So what would you like to know? And I'm not allowed to tell you anything about who they are.
Okay, my question is going to be a little bit less deep than the previous one, but I would like to know, if you have to cycle 10,000 kilometers, where would you go? Where would you start and where would you end?
Brilliant question. Okay, I'm looking forward to that one. So guys, if you're listening to this and you want to know the answer to that question from the next guest, then make sure you come back next week, where we'll be doing another episode with another fantastic person. Juurian, you've been fantastic today. Thank you very much for getting the setup sorted. One thing that we haven't mentioned is you actually made a friend, which has given you access to this space behind. And that just says a lot about the kind of guy you are. You can make quick friends and you can make things happen. So one thing that I'd also love to say is I don't want to be a stranger in your journey. You know, if later on, as you're slightly further around the world, we could do a catch-up episode, especially if people are interested and want to know more. And it would be great to hear from you and get back in contact with you. In the meantime, though, is there anything that you want to plug, or do you want to mention where people can find you to follow along?
Yeah, of course. It would be, I want to plug Movember, of course. It would be fun for me if you follow my journey on social media, on Instagram. But way more important, I think, is the charity thing. So I would like to plug my charity fundraising page on Movember. You can actually find it on my Instagram. So maybe that's the easiest. Go to my Instagram and you find both. It's called The Great Choo Choo. That's my Instagram page. And thank you so much for having me. It was really fun doing this. It's a first for me, but I really enjoyed it. And I love the offer of being able to come back for a catch-up. I would totally be up for that.
Fantastic. Well, To everyone listening today, if you weren't aware, we are the Mindsets Podcast, and our social media is at Mindsets_podcast. That goes for everything. So go and find that, drop it a follow, give it a like, do some sharing. Obviously find Juurian and some of the other guests that we've had. And I hope you enjoy listening. So until next week, I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. With